Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the July meeting of the Housing Opportunity Fund Advisory Board. Thanks for tuning in via the city's YouTube channel. We always start each meeting with public comment, and I believe we have one public commenter, Celeste Scott. Is Celeste on the line?
I am. Good morning.
Good morning.
So I just wanted to say thank you for the Housing Opportunity Fund staff coming to the Pittsburgh, I'm sorry, my name is Celeste Scott. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I'm the Housing Justice Organizer for Pittsburgh United. And we just wanted to thank the Housing Opportunity Fund staff for coming to our meeting on Monday. We're hoping to continue to have that communication, hopefully monthly like we used to. So many different organizations showed up on the call and got a lot of information. There were CDCs and community groups and community members. So, we're looking forward to that. Also looking forward to the data ask that we submitted so that we can get going on getting that information so we can continue to advocate and make these programs successful for the folks that they are meant to impact. And also looking forward to the plan. I'm looking towards July 10th when the eviction moratorium is lifted. We're hoping with the new uptick in COVID-19 that hopefully that moratorium could be extended, because we're seeing that a mass eviction would certainly be a public health crisis. So I'm looking forward to working with everyone. And again, thank you for coming to our meeting, and we look forward to more communication. Thank you.
Thanks, Celeste. She was the only registered public commenter. So we're going to go ahead and call roll. Bettina, can you put the roll up on the screen? Okay, I'm not seeing it, but I can go ahead and start to call names and just tell me if you're here or not while Bettina works on getting it up on the screen. Unless someone else, can somebody else see it? Okay. Okay, actually, hold on, I see it coming. Thank you. Okay, Lena Andrews.
Here.
Jamel Bay. Not here. Joanna Dimming.
Here.
Knowledge Build Hudson.
Here.
Jerome Jackson.
Here.
Ethel Johnson. Not here. Teresa Kale Smith. Not here. Majestic Lane.
Here.
Mark Masterson. Not here. Sam Stu has resigned. Sonia Tillman.
Here.
Derek Tillman.
Here.
Not here. Diamante Walker. Oh, you're there. Diamante Walker is not here today. Adrian Wanahall. I know she's here. Kelly Ware Sebrin.
Here. I'm here, Jessica.
Megan Winters.
Sorry. Here.
Thanks, Adrian. And Megan is here. So we have 10 members and we do have a quorum. Thank you. So I can call us to order. First action, review and acceptance of minutes from the June 4th meeting. Did everyone get a chance to look at those? If so, can I have someone make a motion for acceptance?
Motion for acceptance.
Second.
Okay, I didn't hear, was it Knowledge that did the first? No?
I think it was Majestic.
Tell me again.
It was me. It was Majestic.
Name.
Majestic. It was Majestic.
Okay, Majestic made a motion and now I need a second.
Second. This is Megan.
Megan, thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, anyone opposed? All right, motion carries. Thank you. First thing today is a presentation by the CMU Create Lab. So I'm here to welcome Anne, who will tell us a little bit about what the Create Lab does and show us a few slides of some of what they can track and what they can map as it relates to affordable housing in the city of Pittsburgh. Thank you, Anne.
Thank you. Could I get the screen share? So the Create Lab is a community technology empowerment lab. So we do a lot of work with various community groups in various ways. And the particular work that I've been involved in is part of a project called Earth Time. And we've been doing demographic mapping and community engagement and working with folks to understand what are the stories that need to be told, what are the dynamics people need to understand, and how do we work with them to powerfully tell those stories. If whoever's sharing the screen right now could please stop so I can, thank you. Okay, here. So this is an example of Earth Time. This is looking at the 1937 redlining map. And this is zoomed in a bit on Pittsburgh. So downtown is here. Here's the north side, Lawrenceville, Homewood, Squirrel Hill. And if we look at census data, this is census data from 1990, showing every person who responded to the census, and the color of the dot is how they answered the question of what is your race. So the blue dots said that they were white, the green dots said that they were black, the red dots Asian. And if you look at the patterns, there's a lot of places where there's pretty stark housing segregation. And if we go from 1990 to 2017, a lot of those lines are still there. And you can see that there is especially in the majority Black areas, the areas that are predominantly green, there's been a great deal of loss of population. So compare 1990 to 2017, you'll see that there's been significant population loss among the Black community. And if we actually animate, and now we've added bubbles for some of the public and subsidized housing. So not all of it, but one of the significant contributors here is loss of public housing. So when the bubbles are green, and that's starting in 1990, that housing is open and available. And as it closes, it turns red, and as it's privatized, it turns pink. And when it gets when there are fewer units, it gets smaller. So for instance, in Northview Heights, there's a point where there's a significant loss in the number of units, which corresponds to a lot of the loss of population. Randy points out that you can see what the year is in the bottom corner here. So it's a helpful thing to know. This is kind of collapsing the Black population data from 1990 to the year 2010. And here, each pink dot is a census block that had a higher Black population in 1990 than in 2010. So the number of pink dots is the number of Black population lost in those areas. The greener areas where between 1990 and 2010, the population of Black residents went up, and then the blue is the minimum across both years, so like how much it was steady. So you can see that in that time, there was significant Black population loss in a lot of areas, and there were some areas where there was increase. And then if we zoom out here, see that there's a lot more increase outside of Pittsburgh, people being displaced out into the county. If we look between 2010 and 2017, so this is now American Community Survey data, you can see that there's significant loss in different places. And if we look at like around the Mexican War Streets in Lawrenceville, in downtown in the Strip District, those are the places that in those years have the most loss. So this is switching now to parcel level data. This is no longer census. And here, this is looking at, from the Allegheny County property records, the sales price for each property that was sold at a market rate sale in a 10-year window. So starting in 2005, so this would be sales from 1995 to 2005, and going forward, you can see that the prices that are red are $50,000 or less for the sales price. The blues are $200,000 or more, and the darker reds are even less. So the darkest reds here are less than $10,000 property sales. As we go forward, you can see a lot more blue appearing around the Mexican War Streets area. And so that is basically what gentrification looks like. That is the sales prices, going very steeply up. If we go further out, now that you can sort of see what to look for, and you look around Lawrenceville, Highland Park, Bloomfield, you can see there's also this very, very significant increase in the number of blue dots, which are properties sold for more than $200,000. And if we go to 2005 and compare it to 2020, you can see there's a very drastic change in those particular areas. And then if we look at, this is the race map from 2017. If you look at the borders between the predominantly Black neighborhoods and the predominantly white neighborhoods here, and we look at now, this is the assessed values. So these are the values that the property taxes are based on. You can see that there's a big disparity in terms of the assessed values in majority Black neighborhoods, but there's even a greater difference with the sales prices. So the sales are consistently lower than the assessed values in the predominantly Black areas, and consistently higher, especially in the gentrifying majority white areas. And if we compare those, this is actually comparing for 2020 the assessed values and the sales prices. So in the darkest green areas, the sales prices were more than 80% over the assessed value. You can see that in those areas that turned blue, that's the case. And then the red areas are the areas where the sales price was less than the assessed value. And you can see where those are. This is now looking at data from the HMDA data set. So this is all housing loan related applications. And this is the race of the primary applicant. And you can see that the applicant's race and the race of the background population maps pretty closely, except for there's a significantly lower density in the majority Black areas. And now this is looking at whether or not those housing loans were accepted by the lender. The pink were all rejected by the lender. The green were all accepted by the lender. And you can see that very similar pattern, which gets more pronounced if we look at just this is just the applications that had a white applicant or co-applicant. And this is the subset who had a Black applicant or co-applicant. And you can see that there's a pretty stark difference in terms of both the acceptance rates and the geography of where folks are. And so one of the consequences of the assessment and the mortgage lending in a feedback loop with each other is that you end up with high rates of non-owner occupying owners. So here the dark red are, as far as we can tell by comparing names and property addresses to owner addresses, the red are, as far as we can tell, owner occupied. And the white are owned by somebody else in the county, the blue by people outside the county, and the orange by somebody in the same zip code. So you can see that in those areas with high levels of denial of Black home loan applicants, you end up with those properties being bought for low prices by outside investors mostly. And one of the most telling graphs that we've looked at here is comparing white renters and Black renters by age. So here the purple is renters under 34 years old. This is white renters only. The blue are 35 to 64-year-old, so sort of prime working age adults. You can see that there's very little of the light blue, and then the red is over 75, so you'll see intense pockets of red. Whereas if you look at black renters, there's still a little bit of purple, the younger renters, but the majority of the renters are in this 35 to 64-year-old prime working age. And that if you look at the white people in that age range, they're very, very predominantly homeowners, whereas for the black residents, they're very predominantly renters. And if you look at families who are living below the federal poverty line, very, very low income individuals by race, you can see that most of those black rental families are living in areas with high levels of people living below the poverty line. If we look at the income of all renters over time, this is looking at, so renters with less than 20K a year of income are red, so it's one dot per household. With income 100,000 or more is blue. And in those areas where we saw a high degree of population loss for black families, you can see that there's a very steep increase in the blue and in the greens. The green is 50 to 100,000 a year. And if we look at the rents, see even more drastic changes. So here the red rents are $400 a month or below, and the darkest blue are $1,500 a month or more. And if we compare 2010 here to 2020, you can see that the rents in the vast majority of areas have gone very, very significantly up. And the areas that still have some households paying less than $600 a month, so the orange or the red, those are areas with high levels of subsidized housing. And so it's kind of points out the importance of subsidized housing for people to in the lower income and predominantly black residents in those areas to be able to stay in their homes. So if we look at new construction, so this was put together by Jason Beery looking at property records for all apartment complexes with 20 or more units built from 2000 to 2020. And here the color of the bulb, the size of the bubbles is the number of units, and the color is the rents. And the rents are mostly $1,500 a month or above. This is the one bedroom rents. And you can see that those are in the same areas with the very, very steep increases in rents. And the very steep increases in rents tend to happen even before they're built. And if we look against the same bubbles and families living in poverty, you can see that the displacement of families living below the poverty line tends to precede the building of these places, and that there's a very particular spatial distribution to where they're being built. If we look now at new affordable housing, which was built in that same period, so 2000 to 2020, these are the yellow bubbles appearing here. And you can see that where the affordable housing is being built, there's greater stability among the families living below the poverty line in terms of still being able to live there. Whereas in other areas where there isn't, then in some cases there's a very drastic population loss of people in that situation. This is looking at the affordable housing against the loss of black population. So you can see this is public housing that was torn down and hadn't been rebuilt yet at the time of the latest American Community Survey, which is 2018. But you can see that the relationship between places where there was where folks were able to continue to live there and that affordable housing construction. And then this is just bringing them both together. So here the red are the market rate and the yellow are the affordable. And in the cases where there's mixed developments, it's the bubbles are split. So this is this is, for instance, a mixed unit with more affordable than market rate, and there's quite a few of those built over here. And then in the areas where there's significant market rate construction, there is none. So this is partly why things like requirements for inclusionary zoning would make a big difference, in that in the areas where the market rate is being built are very disjoint, and for the people who live in those areas and depend on the social connections in those areas, it's important to have affordable options. So thank you for your time.
Anne, thank you so much. Does anyone on the advisory board have any questions for Anne?
You do the whole thing again, just like half speed.
Well, we can have another event where there's 30 minutes instead of 15 allocated.
It's not a question directly to Anne, but how are we as the HOF going to be able to keep this information present for our planning and our work forward? And how are we going to translate this into part of our planning?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think that if I could work with somebody who is involved in the discussions at a higher duty cycle and help them learn how to use the tools, learn what there is available, and be part of the ongoing process of constructing these sort of layers and waypoints and stories, I think that would be really helpful. I would be more than happy to do that. Also, we've been talking to Jessica and others about potentially setting up a data sharing agreement that would allow for looking more directly at the impacts that Housing Opportunity Fund programs like the HSP program have had on this. What is the relationship between where those funds are and where the rest of this activity is happening, and be able to help both do sort of better feedback within the organization to help decision making, and also to incorporate it into the sort of storytelling that will help people understand the value of what the Housing Opportunity Fund is contributing to helping the displacement not be worse than it is.
That's great, Anne, because I think it is the interplay between us knowing what the landscape looks like right now and us being incredibly targeted in trying to change the landscape, and then being able to benchmark at the back end that we did have impact. And
Agreed.
I know it's not a direct correlation necessarily, but we would want to be able to, be laser focused, and say for, activities of outreach, being able to look and see where there's a group of folks that would benefit from enhanced outreach, because I'm seeing locations that you have highlighted that are not only service deserts, but then also often missed in those outreach conversations.
Yes, very much so. Yeah, and that I think that better interaction there, I think, would be very helpful. Also, I work very closely with Celeste and other people in the Housing Justice Table and many others involved in the Black advocacy community to help try to understand what's going on. And if you look at pgh.earthtime.org, there are examples of stories that have been co-authored with groups in the community. And we'd like to do more of that, and to be able to incorporate things like, the piece of the story of the Housing Opportunity Fund and things like that. And I can put that link in the chat.
Thank you.
So my question is similar. First of all, this was great. So thank you for that. Similar question to Adrian. Have you all developed any specific recommendations that can be geared towards the banking community, to developers, to organizations like the URA, Have you done that in addition to educating folks on how to use the tools?
So we have been engaging with folks who are involved in banking and PHFA around this, around the data that shows that redlining isn't over, that the behavior of the lenders is contributing actively to you know, a lot of patterns that are harmful. And we've also been talking to Claire Keeley at PCRG about presenting to her quarterly convenings of bankers. COVID kind of got in the way of that, but we're still talking to Claire about kind of how to move forward on that. And we would like to, you know, improve links with those communities as well, and also, you know, try to help foster better communications between the boots on the ground advocacy folks and the folks who are, you know, making the funding decisions and the bankers and such, so that there's greater understanding and empathy across these divides.
Great, thank you so much, Ann. I mean, just a couple quick comments sort of on behalf of the URA. We have met with Ann. We are gonna work with her to share our data. We need to get the agreement in place for that, but in terms of data that the URA has for affordable rental developments across the city, in terms of the HOF data, you know, and the closings and where they're at, we will work with her to get that data. And I do want to continue a partnership moving forward. Later in the conversation, we're going to talk about sort of the structured HOF as it relates to committees and things like that. And I do think that a committee where this is the focus, you know, I think is a great idea. Additionally, the URA, the city to mayor's office, you know, we've already been talking about things as it relates to some of this data, especially as it relates to the maps you saw related to home ownership. And really, how can we as the URA and the city work towards, you know, getting the word out about home ownership and the affordability of it compared to renting in this city, especially amongst folks who might be the first homeowner, you know, in the generations of their family. So we really want to continue to talk about that moving forward, and we're starting to mobilize at the URA some working groups around how to do that. So those are the types of discussions that I welcome to have with the advisory board. And as we talk about a committee structure later in the day, we can talk about that. Is there any other questions or comments before we move on to the next item?
I just want to put in a plug for what Celeste was saying about regular meetings with the Housing Justice Table. They are by far the most valuable group to work with that I've found in terms of really understanding the deep issues and what stories need to be told.
Great. All right. Thanks, Dan. If Bettina, if you can put our presentation back up.
I'm switching with Evan actually because my internet's being a little unstable right now.
Okay. Okay, and Evan, I will pass it over, or actually, I'm sorry, Jeremy, I will pass it over to you to talk about the next item on the agenda, which is the Homeowner Assistance Program Program Administrator contract.
Yeah, so most of our 6 HAP program administrators are doing pretty well, making significant progress on their contracts, especially since everyone was able to continue work recently. But we are here today to ask for contract amendments for Hilltop Alliance and Action Housing to award them 2019 allocations. They are both finishing up their 2018 allocations right now. So these are similar to their current or their 2018 allocations, but this will allow them to continue working projects that are in their pipeline. So we are asking the HOF Advisory Board for a $300,000 contract amendment for Hilltop Alliance and $350,000 for Action Housing.
All
Are there
their
any
other funds,
questions?
all their other funds are committed or spent, I'm assuming.
Their 2018 allocations are completely committed.
Yeah, I mean, just real fast, and Jeremy can probably have a little more data on this, but you know, in the last few months since COVID, of course, there was a brief decline due to you know, lack of being able to do construction in the city there for about a month or a month and a half. But after that, I mean, this program, it's really been an opportunity to get a lot of folks through the queue, especially with the Roofathon. So we actually have, how many under construction right now, Jeremy, do you think?
There's about 110 projects in the process right now.
Right, which in process means either under construction or in the bidding process. So that's a record high number, and we're pretty proud of that. So that's in part why we need the contract amendments for these two. Can somebody make a motion?
Wait, Jessica, I have to recuse myself. Sorry, I had to run, but.
Okay. Yeah, Lena is with Action Housing and needs to recuse herself. Is there anybody else that needs to recuse themselves from this item?
I will. I'm not really sure I have to, but I will. Just yeah.
Okay. So for the minutes, Lena and Derek have both recused themselves. Can somebody make a motion?
Motion to approve contract for Hilltop Alliance, 300,000 2019, HOF allocation, and Action Housing, 350,000 2019 HOF allocation.
I'll second that.
There's a second?
Okay.
Okay.
I'll second.
So Joanna approved it or motioned it, and Jerome Jackson seconded it. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Anybody opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, next is the for sale development program. This is a pre-development loan with the PHDC and the Larmer Consensus Group, and I'm going to pass it over to Evan.
Sure. Good morning, everybody. My name is Evan Miller with the Housing Opportunity Fund, and here to talk to you today about a pre-development loan with the Pittsburgh Housing Development Corporation for Larmer Phase 1A Mayflower Street. This is the PHDC, the Pittsburgh Housing Development Corporation, is a 501c3 nonprofit affiliate development arm of the URA, whose main mission is to build primarily affordable housing in neighborhoods throughout the city in conjunction with neighborhood groups and CDCs. And the project that they're working on right now takes place in Larmer on Mayflower Street, in the northwestern corner of the Larmer neighborhood. This is they're doing in conjunction with LCG, a four-phased for sale effort that's going to yield about 30 units over the course of the lifespan of this project. But here today we're talking about just Phase 1A, which is the new construction of 2 units on what is currently 2 vacant lots on Mayflower Street. So this is a $45,000 pre-development loan, and they would be able to use this for design development, acquisition if necessary, engineering, and other tasks that get them to a construction closing, which they're expecting to have happen around early 2021 with the units completed in late 2021. As I mentioned, they are partnering with the Larmer Consensus Group on this project. LCG's role specifically has been from a fundraising aspect, as well as they move forward, they'll be consulted to select contractors, and they've been heavily involved up to this point and will continue to be so in the community engagement aspect of this project. I believe they're creating a pattern book for these units and making sure that it's contextual to the neighborhood. So by all accounts, they've been pleased with their involvement with PHTC in this partnership in the project. So in terms of this loan coming out of the for sale development program, it would be a 0% interest loan that would come due at the construction closing, whenever that occurs, likely in late 2020 or early 2021. I do have one correction to the packets that I sent out. I apologize for this, but the affordability period that would be tied to these units would actually be 10 years, not 99. And the reason for that is, as per the for sale development program guidelines, if the funds are structured as a loan that's going to be paid back, they're subject to a 10-year deed restriction. Whereas with a lot of the other projects we've been seeing in this program, it's going in as a grant. And when it's grant money, that's triggering that permanent affordability, and that's coming from the HOF legislation. So the deed restriction would be on 2 units for 10 years, not 2 units for 99 years. The total pre-development costs here are going to be $90,000 for those 2 units. And outside of the $45,000 that we're talking about here today, PHTC has a line of credit open where they would get $25,000 to fund these pre-development uses. And then they also, in conjunction with LCG, have an ask for $20,000 towards Bridgeway for a pre-development grant that they expect to be awarded in the month of July. And in discussions with PHTC, we've received confirmation that should they not get that grant from Bridgeway, that they would be able to tap into a separate line of credit and fund that as well. Otherwise, this project will be subject to MWBE protocols as per URA standards, but as of now, they've submitted a narrative, and that's sufficient for where this project's at. But before they actually close and begin construction, they would need to have a completed plan that's approved by the URA's MWBE program staff. So that's all that I have to talk about today for this project. I believe Justin Belton from PHTC is on, but I will leave it open to the advisory board if there's any questions.
Yeah, I just have a quick question. With these units, what's the approximate asking price that we think, or the projected, I would say, asking price?
Hey, Majestic, this is Justin with PHTC. We don't have a asking price set right now, but we are hoping to sell these units at affordable to households at 80% of area median income. So I'm not sure exactly what that price is, but they will be affordable units.
And
at that income level, it's probably going to be around 140-ish thousand.
Yeah.
If it goes much higher than that, it won't be affordable at 80% AMI.
Got it. And just for context, the loan that'll be on it will keep it affordable for 10 years. As far as the capital stack, are there other covenants that would keep it affordable longer than 10, or is the goal to have this affordable for 10, for approximately 10 years?
The goal would be to have it affordable for approximately 10 years. The PHTC would also be seeking URA second mortgage for this, which would come with some homeowner restrictions, but I believe that the affordability period will top out at 10 years.
Okay.
It may, however, be a little bit too early to clearly answer that question, though, because we don't know all the funding sources that'll go into the construction. So
Gotcha.
there may be some additional affordability put on the units at that point.
Correct. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Is the summary wrong then, where it says 99 years?
Yes, that was wrong.
Yes. Yeah, it should say, if people want to make the change to their packet, it should say 10 years. And that is accordance with the HOF legislation. The legislation itself basically says if it goes in the form of a grant for development of for sale units, it's 99 years. But in the legislation, loans can be at 10.
I have a general question that relates to this development, but it's probably more, I just don't have that much concern about a 10-year affordability. I guess I'm wondering about the 99-year affordability. How, I mean, if you have a low-income buyer who has a home for sale, how long do they have to wait to find another low-income buyer before they sell their unit, right? Like, I'm thinking that for a low-income buyer, probably their home is their way that they are earning wealth for them and themselves and their families. So if you have a home on the market, and 6 months goes by or 3 months goes by, whatever that time frame, and there has not been a low-income buyer that is qualified for it, for a loan, how long do they have to wait before they can just sell the house?
Right. That's a really good question, Sonia. We haven't done a lot of these yet, so I don't have a good set of samples to tell you about. I would say one thing that the legislation for HOF speaks to is community land trust. Someone like Ed Newser or somebody at the City of Bridges Land Trust could maybe answer that question, a little bit better about how they can go about finding buyers. It might be something where the HOF has to put those homeowners in connection with someone like the City of Bridges to be able to help them market their house.
Again, I guess I'm less concerned about the 10-year time frame, but if someone's owned a house for 15 or 20 or 30 years, then that's a good bit of equity. That's a good bit of family wealth. And, so there has to be some balance there has to be some balance.
Right. And the legislation also does not speak to what that payoff calculation can be for a homeowner, like how much can the price increase over, like, let's say they sell it in 30 years, how much can that price increase? With community land trust, that equation is usually built into the transaction.
Right.
Yeah. So we need to, that's a really good question, and we need to kind of figure that out. We haven't closed on too many of these 99-year ones, but we do need to work with the developers and encourage them to kind of identify that payoff calculation up front.
But is the reason we haven't closed, is it the 99 year? Because I think the last time we had an in-person meeting, we had I think it was the last in-person meeting, we had some usage data, and the number it was really low, like only 1 or 2, or, it was something very low as far as actually having developers access the program. So I'm wondering now if that 99 years is one of the things that's keeping people away.
I'll say the ones that we have closed on have primarily been part of land trusts already. So we only have one that was done outside of a land trust, and these will be the next ones.
Speaking of committees, this is probably something that needs to be looked into.
Agreed. I agree.
I was curious as to how we decide whether we're doing a loan or a grant to determine the 99 versus 10-year, and how do we make that determination?
Sure. So in this particular situation, all they need at this point is a pre-development loan. This is part of the TRID, the East Liberty and Bakery Square TRID, and there is anticipated TRID proceeds that will be able to pay off this loan. So it's really just a timing issue for this particular deal, that they need the funds about 2 months prior to getting those TRID funds. So that's how we're comfortable with the loan in this particular situation. In other situations, when houses are ready to move towards construction, basically if the sales price is going to be large enough to pay off loan debt, then they can ask for a loan. If the total development cost is, and this is generally what happens, is $200,000 and they can sell it for $140,000, then they're going to need that grant. And so basically the determination is based on their performance. Any other questions?
This is just a question about the size of the units. Do you know, on average, about how big they will be, I should say?
Yeah, so the 2 units will be 3 bedrooms each, and the square footage is to be determined right now, but we're looking in the range of 1,400 to 1,500 square feet per home.
Okay.
If there's no more questions, can someone move to make a motion?
So Jessica, I need to recuse myself from this vote.
Yeah, Jessica,
Okay, that's
I
a
do
really
too.
good point. Okay, anybody who thinks that their organization would be involved in the for sale development program line item, we're still in the 2018 funding year, please recuse themselves. So that's Jerome, Lena.
Well, Jerome and I are on the board of PHDC too.
Oh, that's a good point too.
Yeah.
Okay, so they are both on the board of PHDC. They also, or at least Jerome, works for a CDC that may at some point apply for this. Derek, did I hear you say?
Yes.
Okay, so you have to abstain. Anybody else? Sonia, I can't see you, but do you need to
Oh,
abstain
no,
on
I'm
this
fine.
one?
Nope, I'm fine.
Okay. Okay, so let the record show that Jerome, Lena, and Derek abstain. Can someone make a motion?
I move to approve. It's Sonia.
Sonia?
I'll second. This is Megan.
Megan, thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? All right, motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay. Next, this is just an update. This doesn't need a motion, but I did want to let folks know at the URA board meeting next week, there's going to be an action on our agenda that is basically consolidating the rental gap program guidelines, which is the HOF guidelines, with the rental housing development improvement guidelines, which was the very similar program that the URA has ran for decades out of home and CDBG money. They were extremely similar guidelines, except the rental gap program guidelines, as you know, spoke very intentionally towards how much funding can be available at 30% AMI and 50% AMI, in accordance with the legislation of HOF. So most people, I think, are aware that at the URA, there's been some recent changes, and Tom Cummings, who was the director of the housing department, has retired from the URA. When HOF started, Tom was the director of the housing department, and I became the director of the Housing Opportunity Fund department. And now basically both of those functions are coming together in one department. Our department is now called Housing Lending and Investments. Therefore, and we have talked about this at this committee in the past, we're going to start moving towards funding rounds, especially on the rental side. Eventually, we're going to get there on the for sale development side as well. However, we have a lot of funding remaining in the for sale line item right now, so that is less urgent. But as you know, we are fully committed on the rental gap program funding right now for our 2018 and 2019, and we just received the 2020 funds from the city. So the plan really is probably roughly August, but roughly it might go into September. We will be issuing an RFP for rental, affordable rental, and we will assemble a review committee, and there can be representatives from the HOF advisory board on that committee, but basically to make it easy and clear for developers, to have the home, the CDBG, and the HOF, together as one. So those guidelines will be presented at the URA board. We did not take anything out of the RGP guidelines. I mean, we made no substantial changes. It was basically just a lot of cutting and pasting to get both sets of guidelines put together as one, and it will keep the name Rental Gap Program. And as soon as they're approved by the URA board, I can, send them out if anyone would like to see them. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, I just wanted to give everybody that update.
I have a question. If it's nothing substantive, like, is there anything that we would need to know about that will be different? How will, I don't know, what should we be aware of with this, aside from there's not big changes?
I mean, I don't know. Like when we put them together, we were really conscious of not to make any changes to what the HOF advisory board had approved. So the way the legislation reads, like for example, for HOF, you have to be a nonprofit applicant. For CDBG and home, you technically do not need to be, depending. They have their own rules as well. For certain parts of CDBG, you also have to be a nonprofit. So it really depends. And so what we did was in the guidelines, we basically just said, for the following funding sources, like for HOF, you have to be a nonprofit. For, home, you can be a for-profit. Whatever the actual requirements of the funding sources is what was identified when we put them together. The only other thing I would say is, just bear with us as we go through our first funding round so we can figure out how that's actually going to work with awarding, different funding sources at one time with them all having their separate approval processes. But that's something URA staff that we're figuring out. Anything else? Okay, so we'll just move on to next on the agenda, which is another voting item. Jeremy is going to talk about the Community Ambassador Program.
Yeah, before I get into it, I'm going to pause and let Adrian for recusal.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeremy. As folks know, about a year ago, I joined the team at Omicello. Omicello is going to be discussed in this particular project, and I would like to recuse myself from the conversation.
Thanks, Adrian.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks. And also I should say that the funding for this item is coming out of HSP. So if anybody else needs to recuse themselves because of their connections with HSP, please do so now.
I think I need to recuse myself again. So.
Okay.
Thanks.
Lena with Action Housing. Anybody else? Okay. Thank you. Go ahead, Jeremy.
Okay. So for right now, we will be talking about Omicello as being the lead agency for the Community Engagement Ambassador Program. But shortly after this slide, we will also get into more details about the Community Ambassador Program. And what it is and what our plan is for that. But for right now, we are asking for approval of a contract with Omicello to administer the Community Engagement Ambassador service for the Housing Stabilization Program. So, Omicello is a mission-focused, minority and women-owned enterprise that focuses on community building without displacement. And so they do have existing connections and services with community-based organizations. So while we were planning what this community engagement ambassador program looks like, we recognized that we did have to find a lead agency to be the intermediary to help manage the service for us. So we did reach out to 3 organizations. Omocello was the only one that had capacity and similar services and the willingness to take this project on, and at a pretty fast turnaround time. So we had some great conversations. I think this program aligns with both of our missions. And so Omocello would be essentially managing the community ambassadors with training. They will be the fiduciary and also administering the applications for the ambassadors. But the URA will be there as a support and advisor throughout the process. So this recommendation is for $200,000 to administer the program. This includes money for Omocello to administer the program, as well as funding for the actual community ambassadors, the grant money that they will get paid to do the service. $150,000 is from HOF and $50,000 is from CDBG coronavirus funding for the total of $200,000. Any questions?
Do we have an estimation on how many community engagement ambassadors are going to be able to be hired for this?
So it depends on how many people each ambassador group will have working on the program. But if all of them that apply will have the maximum of 5 people working on this program, we expect that we could fund up to 5 or 6 groups.
Will all HSP program administrators kind of come through the community engagement ambassadors now?
No, they won't all come through this service, and we'll get into how this works into the general HSP a little bit later.
How much is allocated for administration, and how will the funds go to them? One lump grant or reimbursement based on what they spend?
There's about $49,000 that will be allocated for administration from July until the end of January. The rest will all be for grants for the ambassadors. Sorry, Joanne, what was the second part of the question?
How will the money be drawn down?
It will be reimbursement based on a monthly basis.
And I just want to speak to the admin question, because again, I think there's a level of confusion about what's core admin versus what is actually service.
Yeah.
So core admin pieces of we will act as the fiduciary. We will make sure that everyone's reports go in, all the numbers and data are provided to the city. However, part of what is considered quote unquote admin is the direct support, mentoring, training, engagement with the ambassadors themselves. So there is intent to make sure that we are supporting the ambassadors in growing their infrastructure, not only to do this outreach and engagement, but hopefully to prepare to take on more roles, utilizing funding like HOF funding. So again, I just want to make that delineation on admin. It's not, Omocello is drawing down, $50,000 to write checks. There really is an educational support, mentoring, data assist component of the program. And that's rolled into what's called quote unquote admin.
Yeah, thanks for adding that, Adrian. A big component of the Community Engagement Ambassador Program is not only connecting people to these organizations, but trying to help these smaller community-based organizations that don't have experience or capacity taking on government contracts. And so the hope is that someone like Omocello can work with them, mentor them to build that capacity and those skills to be able to then eventually take on government contracts on their own.
This coordinated, will also connect people to the other rental assistance programs? It seems like that world's growing really fast and it's very confusing. And,
yes, it will. We'll get into that when we go into the details.
Okay, great.
What was the procurement like requirement for this project? I know you guys typically put out RFPs, so I was a little surprised with this. It sounds like you had some conversations, but can you talk a little bit about the procurement and also maybe Adrian can speak to Amicello. I think of Amicello as a developer. I know they have a nonprofit as well, and I know they do some training, but I think of them as a developer. So just sharing a little more about the nonprofit arm maybe.
Yeah, so in terms of procurement, we did reach out to organizations that had capacity and had similar services to this that would be able to start services within a few weeks, to be honest. And so we talked to 3 organizations, 2 of them said no, and Amicello was enthusiastic about this. And so I don't want to speak for Amicello or Adrian, but they do have similar services that are community-based, working with low-income residents on housing stability.
Yeah, so Amicello as a company is a little bit more complicated than being a developer. So we do have real estate investment, real estate development, real estate ownership and management of affordable housing. We also have some limited commercial properties that we own and manage. We also have a construction company that does performance of rehabilitation and renovation of affordable housing, works with community partners for commercial build outs. When those commercial build outs meet our mission. We also have a full home adaptation program where we do accessibility modification and adaptations for individuals to be able to stay in home as opposed to go into more restrictive settings. We have a service arm. My actual title is Director of Community Health Initiatives. So my job actually touches each one of the programs that impact community health and wellness and the connection between health and housing. One of the prongs of that work is family navigators. Family navigators are individuals that do things that are very similar to what the ambassadors are going to be doing, making those connections with individuals and families who are in either a housing crisis or just experiencing housing instability. Trying to make sure that eviction and displacement are not the norms in rental properties. So we do a lot of work in that area, connecting with tenants, life skills, behavioral health support, service connection. And then as you mentioned, Joanna, we also have a full nonprofit, Amicello Cares, which is really focused on wealth enhancement and avoidance of displacement for people in communities. So thinking about emerging communities and economic opportunities, how do individuals in neighborhoods actually connect to neighborhood growth? Doing that through their individual wealth, investment in infrastructure, learning how to purchase and develop real estate, and also how to enhance their small businesses. And procurement, for the sake of transparency, Amicello asked that very question. Will there be an RFP process? What will that look like? Of course, being concerned, I'm obviously on this board, but also just as a person who cares about the community and our process, you know, what is the transparency? How will people be able to apply? Unfortunately, I think the timeline on these new funds is really pushing communities to be able to get these dollars out. To be able to do a respectful procurement process is incredibly difficult. It's going to also be difficult for the ambassadors. There are other agencies that are doing an even shorter timelined process. I think that we're just as a community not really ready for the introduction of this type of funding. We saw the same thing during the stimulus funding that happened many years ago, that the government says the money needs to be on the street tomorrow, which doesn't give us the best opportunity for the kind of process we would like to have and the level of transparency we want to have. So I'm also particularly mindful of that issue. We did talk extensively with the URA and the county about that very issue and how we could do our best to give you all the information that you need and time. Our timeline's also very tight here. We started this conversation, what, a week ago, Jeremy?
Yep.
So I apologize, Omicello apologizes for the truncated process and the inability for folks to really engage. But we do recognize it's an issue and would love any feedback on how to either make that transition easier, or if there's real concern that this kind of project can't move forward without that process, to be candid about that.
Oh, so this is Jessica. I saw the question in the chat from Joanna about, so does this have to be publicly bid? So no, it does not have to be publicly bid. The HOF funding source does not require that. Additionally, the URA, as a quasi-governmental entity, we do bid a lot of things, but if our funding source does not require it, we do not have to bid. We have to follow the logic of the funding source. Additionally, in this particular situation, the timing is of the essence here with COVID, and actually the need to expend for the social service providers, the 11 groups you saw last week, they need to expend their CDBG basically by December. So if the community engagement ambassadors are going to be able to help with that, we got to get them on now. And so that was the rationale. And as Jeremy said, several groups, were approached with this as well. So that is the way, this was procured for this particular engagement.
But it is largely,
any other questions?
Impacted.
Go ahead, Jeremy.
It is largely impacted by the timing of all of these initiatives. So, we have our eviction prevention program that we'll talk about launching soon. We have the increased HSP that most of them started yesterday, as well as the PHFA funding coming out on the 6th. So those were the big motivators to why we had to move quickly.
And if folks haven't seen, there is a county announcement about the PHFA funds that's happening today at 4 o'clock. And Omicello is not participating in that process. We support the county's parallel desire to have ambassadors, but the turnaround to be involved in the county's process. We've had a little over a week to talk to the URA. We had limited conversations with the county and didn't feel it was appropriate or well thought out to jump into a process that's actually going to launch on Monday.
To answer Joanne's question about the funding, 150,000 is coming from 2020 HOF HSP allocation. 50,000 is coming from CDBG CV for rental money.
And we are delving into the procurement requirements on the CDBG right now, but Omicello will be procuring the groups as well. So from that side, we were comfortable proceeding the way that we proceeded.
And just to that point, again, so the ambassador groups will apply directly with us, and we would love to have a representative from HOF be part of that process of looking at RFPs. Again, all of these timelines are incredibly truncated. We want to make sure that information gets out, people have the support that they need to apply, and then we can quickly look at those RFPs and get support out to those community partners.
Are there any other questions? If not, can we move towards a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Derek,
Yeah,
thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
I didn't hear who that was.
That's Knowledge, Bill.
Knowledge. Okay, so Derek made the motion, Knowledge seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Anybody opposed? And Lena and Adrian abstained. Thank you.
Thank you.
Motion carries. Okay, next, sort of on the same topic, and I think, hold on, just let me look at the agenda real fast. I think those are technically all the voting items. So I do encourage people to stay on the line if they can for the HSP update, and then also for the discussion we're going to have about the chair and the advisory board bylaws. But while we're on the topic of HSP, if Brianna and Jeremy and Bettina, if they can walk us through a presentation. This presentation was created because we have been receiving a lot of questions about HSP and some of the processes. So the team made this presentation earlier this week. This is the presentation for those of you that were in the Pittsburgh United Roundtable meeting that was conducted at that meeting, but we thought it important to show the advisory board the same presentation.
All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Jessica, for that introduction. I'm going to walk you through the first half of our HSP presentation. Next slide, please. So as we know, the Housing Stabilization Program was created to address the economic crisis here within the Pittsburgh area. So it was designed to help residents maintain a safe and stable living environment. As far as eligibility is concerned, renters have to be at or below 50% AMI, as well as living in the city, or if they're seeking security deposit assistance, they have to be moving into the city. It has been expanded to assist homeowners, so homeowners have to be at or below 80% AMI within the city limits. Next slide. So these are our 2020 program administrators. So as you can see, it increased from 5 to 12. So we have brought on an additional 7 providers. And just a special note, 2 of those providers do specialize in certain populations. So we have the Veterans Leadership Program, who will assist renters who identify as being veterans, as well as the Jewish Family and Community Services, who will help residents who identify as being either an immigrant or refugee or speak English as a second language. So I just wanted to put that note in to make sure we're doing our due diligence to reach the most vulnerable populations. Next slide. So as you know, our coordinated entry is through 211. Some of the benefits of having them brought on to the process is they do operate 24/7. You can call them, you can text them, as well as you can use their chat function on their website. In addition, they can communicate in over 250 translation languages for the client to get the best services that's needed. So generally when they call 211, what they have to do is once they're connected to a resource navigator and the resource navigator goes through their spiel of, you know, opening up the conversation, the client has the opportunity to state the language that they speak to be connected to the translation services to get connected to our program. And in addition to that, they do maintain a comprehensive database of a multitude of agencies and community programs to further assist the client. Next slide. So as we know, COVID has definitely made an impact in how we all conduct business and produce service. So as you know, we did create a modification in our process to meet the demand of the program, in addition to be respectful of program providers who may have been transferred to working remotely. So some of those changes include the identification process. So now the client can take a picture of their ID and email it to the provider. That's sufficient enough. And for residents who may be undocumented, at least one adult must have a government issued ID, and it's not limited to a driver's license. A passport could be sufficient, social security card, birth certificate, you name it. And if there are any questions regarding the identification, you can definitely ask if it may be sufficient enough. In terms of income, we have ran into, or at least from my experience as a service coordinator, some employers may not want to provide verification of employment, or they don't have the capacity to do so. So the service provider can take verbal confirmation and note it in the client's file. In terms of just the general documentation and the signing of documents, they have been made fillable for ease. And also we did recommend using DocuSign. And we did find that a lot of the clients do have access to the internet, so they're able to complete those forms seamlessly. And if those aren't, readily available, then verbal confirmation can be used as a last resort. And as far as income, just to go back, we do calculate it moving forward. So we know COVID has, created some barriers for income. So, I mean, due to that, we will waive it during this time because of COVID and the impacts that it has. And finally, as another consideration, city taxes. So our guidelines do stipulate that we do have to check city taxes. So being that we are currently working remotely as well, we're unable to do so. So we did encourage our service providers to do their due diligence in collecting city taxes from the landlord. And if the landlord's not willing to provide it, then we can definitely go with the county taxes since we check it for all properties. And just to walk you more through other considerations that have been made, I will turn it over to Jeremy.
Great, thanks, Brianna. Next slide. So in addition to the considerations that Brianna outlined, there are some other considerations that we have been working with providers on just to ensure that service is accessible to everyone. So in terms of language access, now that we do have Jewish Family and Community Services on board, we will be referring households who have English as a second language to JFCS so that they can best support them. But if any of the other organizations receive referral where English is a second language, which will be noted on the intake referral, the URA can assist with connecting them to language services to ensure that they can have consistent communication. We've also asked all of our providers to limit non-HOF paperwork as much as possible to ensure that we are minimizing the administrative burden on the service providers as well as the household seeking assistance. So just as a reminder, the actual HOF paperwork application for this program is about 2.5 pages. We also then have HMIS, which is the Homeless Management Information System, that is typically required for HUD rental assistance programs. Since we are not HUD funded, this is optional for HOF. So we have been reminding service providers that clients definitely may opt out of this data entry. Outside of that, again, we are asking providers to really limit other documentation. So places like the YWCA told us they're only requiring 1 other page, so that clients only need to fill out about 3 pages of paperwork. Next slide. This is a graphic to show you which of the agencies are receiving which funds, because we are working with 4 different funds within the HSP program. Some providers are getting multiple funding streams, so we just want to kind of show you this on a graphic of who is receiving which funds. Next. So because we are involving CDBG-CV funds to expand the housing stabilization program, I also want to show a kind of a chart to show what the differences and similarities are with these funding, with the different funding streams. So CDBG-CV can still assist with rental arrears, rent forward, and utilities, just like HOF can. The big difference is that the CDBG cannot fund application fees, security deposit, and we have to be very careful about tiering because there's a big focus on duplication of benefits with the CARES money and CDBG money. So we just need to work with the providers to ensure that we're very careful on calculating what that duplication of benefit is. But other than that, you know, the only biggest difference is that CDBG-CV funds must be used for needs that stemmed from coronavirus. And although we don't have specific guidance from HUD we have general guidance for the providers, and it's, essentially if the household believes that their financial situation has been negatively impacted because of COVID-19, we just have to document that in a short narrative for CDBG funds. Next slide. All right, so these are the details about the Community Ambassador Program. So this is in response to the URA receiving community feedback, including from Pittsburgh United, about how there needs to be more assistance helping people through the system, and not just for HSP, but the housing system in general, especially as we're getting all of this influx of stimulus money and new programs. So there's, the community ambassador programs will help spread outreach about the program, help connect people to the programs who may not otherwise seek out this assistance or know about it. And then we also hope that this will increase the capacity for the actual service providers so that they can focus on the case management side of it, while the community ambassadors can essentially help the households get to the starting line, essentially, with a complete application, the documentation that they need. So what the process will look like is that someone will call 211 as they would normally for housing stabilization program. There will be a question that we will ask, essentially asking, do you need assistance with collecting documentation or completing the application? And we will list kind of what that documentation is. And that is essentially the proof of need, like your bills or your lease, and ID verification. If they answer yes, they would like some help with that, that will trigger a referral for community ambassador assistance, which will then go to Omocello, who they can then assign to a community ambassador to assist. That referral will also list who the household was referred to, like the service provider, who will actually do the case management and financial assistance, so that the community ambassadors know exactly which service provider that household is assigned to, so that they can coordinate that communication directly with them. And so as soon as the community ambassadors can help them complete the application and collect the documentation, they will send it directly to them so that they can get the process started. The hope is that this will speed that process up a little bit, so that we can expedite the issuance of the financial assistance. So we will continue to try to coordinate with our county partners on this, because they still do want to do community ambassador programs. It just seems like we will have different lead agencies, but the goal is that this service will be similar to the county program, so that we have continuity of service throughout city and county. In terms of timing, so the Omocello as a lead agency still needs to get URA board approval next week. If that happens, we then will, the RFP date is wrong. We will then work on getting applications out in the middle of July, hoping to start services the first week of August. So the ambassadors will not only assist with HSP applications, they will be trained in all of the other rental assistance programs that are coming out there right now, so that they can best support these households and get them access to as many resources as they qualify for. So that will include, the county's care rent relief program. It'll include the PHFA and all of the other programs that are coming out there. We also are talking with the Pittsburgh Commission on Human Relations with their mediation program to see how we can integrate that in, because with all these mediation and eviction prevention programs coming on, we want to make sure that we coordinate with everyone so that all of these new programs are not so siloed. Any questions on the Community Ambassador Program?
Yes. Do the HSP payments, once the community ambassadors kind of advocate for someone, do the payments go directly to the landlord or to the tenant?
The payments always go to the vendor.
Okay. Okay.
And do the ambassadors get paid based on successful applications or completed applications?
So the ambassadors will get paid 3 ways. One will be a mini grant up front so that they can attend all the training between Omocello and the URA. We want to pay them for that time. The second part is they will get a monthly fee that covers kind of coordination of invoices and organization, operations essentially. And then they will get paid per complete application. And the reason behind that is, the big reason behind doing this is that so we can get more complete applications on a timely basis. So they will get paid for complete applications, and Omocello will determine that based on a checklist that we give them. But what happens after that application has no impact on, the funding for the ambassadors.
And do the applicants have to call 211 first, or could they call the community ambassador directly?
So they could call the ambassador, but we will ask the ambassadors to redirect them through 211 so that we do keep a centralized intake system. But, they could certainly call 211, say, hey, I was already working with the ambassadors, and we will have questions in the intake that could then streamline them being referred to where they were working with Omocello or those ambassadors, so that they don't completely have to go through a new system.
Can the ambassador call 211 on their behalf just to make sure everything's synced?
Yeah, if they're sitting there with the household, they absolutely could.
Just one point of clarity there, however, I know that something that can be very frustrating is that sometimes we want so badly to be able to expedite and explain that sometimes we can get to a point where we're trying to represent for the person that's applying. The person that's applying needs to provide confidential information directly, and we're really going to encourage that it is with, not for.
Yes.
Because we want to make sure that we're protecting people's information, we're protecting their process, all of their confidentiality is held, and it's really a process that they understand so that they're engaged for the full time. So just to put that point out there.
Any other questions on the ambassador program? Once the applications are available, we will send it to the HOF advisory board so that you can help distribute it.
Jeremy, I do think this is a great idea, and I hope that you guys will come back with data on how it's going, because we always think a lot at Action Housing about outreach and how to be more effective, and this seems like it could be a really good, maybe when we're a few months in, if you could come back to the Housing Opportunity Board, or maybe that's Omocello, but one of you come back and sort of report how it's going and whether it's actually increased applications. I'm sure it will, but I just would be curious to hear about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So this tentatively goes through the end of January. Before that point, we do hope to collect data, analyze that, compare it to people who did not use the ambassadors, to then have data to drive how we can then continue to expand the program and what funding will be appropriate. So definitely we will come back.
Okay, great.
So I have a question. All the funding is available right now as far as like the COVID money is available right now. So if someone called 211 and they wouldn't apply, they couldn't, and they were dealing with COVID issues, they could receive those funds right now. Is this true?
That's correct. So most of the 12 providers have started services as of yesterday. There's just 2 or 3 that are starting next week. So yes, both HOF and COVID funding is currently available.
Great.
All right, I think we can move to the next one. So the other component is the eviction prevention program. So although I think we all know HSP was not designed to be an eviction prevention program, but because of COVID, here we are. And so we have been talking with the housing court and Pittsburgh Foundation. They essentially asked us about 2 months ago to try to develop some kind of rapid response to meet the pending eviction moratorium on July 10th. So everyone was quite worried about that and what that would mean for evictions in July and August. So this is what we have. We've had many conversations with the housing court, and so tenants who file an appeal with the housing court will then be referred to this program if they are in the city. What makes this a little bit different is that we have streamlined the referral process because that is what we heard from the housing court, that the current process for rental assistance does not work. Well, it's not effective for the eviction process timeline. So instead of someone going to the court, getting information to call 211, waiting for 211 to then send a provider to contact them, we've kind of streamlined that where someone at the housing court will provide the information. They still have to call 211 just to get that centralized intake information, but they will go directly to YWCA or Action Housing. Because of the changes we made in the process, we now have goals for this program where the agencies will deliver an eligibility status to the tenant and the landlord within 3 days of getting the referral, with the hopes of issuing payment within 10 days. And again, that's all dependent on if we get all of the documentation up front, but that is the goal for the program. Additionally, between the URA, the service providers, and the housing court, we will have some routine staff coordination between the providers and the court staff so that we can ensure that we are coordinating with what the court is seeing to who the providers are helping to ensure that continuity of service and communication. The program is funded by the Pittsburgh Foundation, and so the hope is similar to the Ambassador program. We will collect data, analyze that, and see how we can further fund it based on the data. In terms of timing, we are ready to go to start services by July 10th, and so that's the goal. I don't have an answer on how many households can be assisted right now, but we do have $400,000 committed to the program right
now. Is there a maximum amount that any person can receive, or is it just based on their eviction amount?
Yeah, so because this eviction pilot is still under the umbrella of Housing Stabilization Program, we will follow those guidelines. So they will be capped at $3,000 per household. Any other questions on this program?
Is there any way that the landlord, let's say that the landlord's not paying their taxes or something like that, does that disqualify
No.
the tenant?
So because this was funded by the Pittsburgh Foundation and they served as advisors creating this program, they really wanted us to make this as streamlined as possible and remove any requirements that are traditionally HOF, but maybe doesn't have to be because this is privately funded. So we took out 2 components. One was city tax check. So we removed that process. We also removed the inspection process because although there is some value to that, time is of the essence. And if that takes a week, that's a week in the eviction process. That's critical. So we took that out as well. So essentially, once the provider determines that they are eligible, they can proceed forward and issue that payment.
And the referral has to come from the courts, or can the person call directly 211 themselves?
So it doesn't necessarily have to come from the court, but if they call 211, they will have to have filed an appeal and provide that landlord-tenant docket number just to ensure that we are taking referrals from only this source for this pilot. Mm-hmm. And I do just want to put a shout out that Judge Christine Ward and Diane Wainwright at the Civil Division have been extremely helpful in trying to make this happen and pulling everyone together, as well as Jane Downing from the Pittsburgh Foundation. Okay, I think you can move on.
Just one last thing. How will so if they don't have to go through 211, how does that work? Since you just said the last program had to go through 211. So how will you make sure it gets captured or?
So they do still have to go through 211. So even if they're at the court and they filed the appeal, the staff at the help desk will give them the phone number and the information for the eviction prevention program. So they still have to call 211, but that referral will be directed to the YWCA or Action Housing.
Gotcha.
All right, thank you, Jeremy. Jeremy and Brianna and Bettina and the whole team has done so much work on this over the last, couple months. So I just want to, thank them and thank all of you on the advisory board and the advocates and everybody for really helping, us all join together and create this program during this pandemic. Okay. So we only have about 15 minutes left, I think. So we'll try to go through the remaining items relatively quickly, but I did want to give everybody an update regarding the chair nomination process and also just the advisory board basically process in general, because we really haven't talked about it for a while. There was a call with folks that had volunteered to be on the nominating committee earlier this week, and I apologize up front if I forget anybody, but I know it was Megan and Mark and Knowledge and Jerome and Derek. Did I forget anybody? Okay. We discussed the need, to have a chair so that I can go about the business of being staff and director of the Housing Lending Department, and we can have a chair in place. But before we get there, a couple of other things that the advisory board talked about. Early on, before the programs were created, I had drafted just a few bullet points on what a chair description would be. So I am going to kind of add on to that in the upcoming week or so based on what it seems like we need a chair to do with the existing programs and the way we operate currently. And then I'm going to send it to the advisory board for you all to redline and put your own thoughts into that description. At the same time, I will be contacting HRNA advisors. Some of you remembered that they helped us at the very beginning of HOF to get the conflict of interest policy, to convene brainstorming meetings with all of you that were on the advisory board from the beginning. And their contract at the time included creation of bylaws. But then what happened was, as the brainstorming meetings went on, we created 5 programs. And so their contract had shifted towards helping us create the framework for those programs. And they helped us start to draft the program guidelines. And so we used our contract for that. And we never got to the point of creating bylaws for the advisory board, which we definitely need after operating for 2 years, realizing that we're operating without bylaws. So I'm going to go back to them to see what it would take to get bylaws and either contract with them or potentially start to draft some bylaws ourselves. But the goal is really to start to get some draft bylaws in place by August at the latest. Ideally by the August advisory board meeting. It might be a little delayed from that, recognizing the situation the country's in right now, but we're going to try to get those a draft form by August so that the advisory board can discuss the description for the chair and the bylaws at the same time. Does anybody have any questions about any of that? Does that make sense to everybody? That next month we'll be discussing the chair description and the bylaws. The advisory board nominating committee expressed interest to get to a vote, for the chair as quickly as possible. So if that is discussed in August, I think the outline was then to hopefully be able to vote in September, but we would ask people based on the chair description to self-nominate at that point. If they feel like, they can do what is in the chair description, and then have that, voted on in the public venue of the advisory board. If anybody that was on that call thinks I forgot anything, left anything out, or misremembered anything, please chime in. Okay, and go ahead.
The committees, see it on here, but I don't think you mentioned that.
Yeah. So yeah. Thank you, Derek, for pointing that out. The other thing that has came up recently through a lot of conversations, in fact, we even mentioned it today, is, there's a need, I think, for more specific committees. Like Sonia today was talking about the for sale and that 99-year, deed restriction. In terms of Anne's presentation regarding race and how can, our programs help to reverse, some past and current mistakes, and things like that. Also, rental development, because we're going to be issuing the RFP, that definitely is going to take some focus. And then, there are definitely some of you on the advisory board that are very interested in HSP and the rental assistance. I think, of the 17 of you, most of you, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but feel that your expertise and experience tie to, one or more areas, pretty closely. So we would want everyone to kind of self-nominate for committees. So part of my job or my goal would be next month when we have the draft of the description and potentially the bylaws to also have a draft of, 4 or 5 committees. And then those really need to meet like regularly. And I think that will keep us too from potentially having, really long, advisory board meetings if the committees can focus on, the work at hand, especially when we get towards like the RFP for rental. If the committee can really work on that and review that, and that will be able to shorten the amount of time spent here on a Thursday morning. Any questions on that?
No, that's great.
Or any discussion in general?
Should we email that to you or to someone else?
In terms of suggestions for committees, you can feel free to email them to me. If there's a committee that you already, that you recommend that we have and that you want to be on. Otherwise, I will come with a list of committees next month and you can all self-appoint yourself to committees.
It would probably be helpful to have like someone chair each committee from the board so that staff isn't like overwhelmed trying to manage all these committees.
That's great. Perfect. Yes.
Do you anticipate the committees being only advisory board members and staff?
So for right now, because I think it'll happen as part of the bylaws, but so I think the answer to that is yes, Sonia, but I don't know how, like for example, the rental committee, there will be a larger group that reviews the results of the RFP. So I would say it's either that committee plus, some non-committee members, or maybe a representative of that committee, depending on how large it is. Haven't quite figured that out yet. Because HOF, is one portion of a larger, funding platform. So those are the details we're trying to figure out.
I'm sorry, my internet dropped out for a second. For the bylaws, that was when you were mentioning bringing in an outside firm to start working on that?
Yes. Yeah, I'm hoping it'll be a quick, you know, relatively reasonably priced engagement, just because they had started to put some thought into it, you know, a couple of years ago, and they have helped other cities, you know, with similar funds create bylaws. So I'm hopeful that it can be a relatively fast process.
And then we would review them and vote, I'm imagining, and make any.
Yes, yes. Right. So I'm hopeful to have drafts by August, but I can't promise them on the bylaws, but I can promise a draft on the chair description and committee structure. Anything else? Okay.
Is everything pending the bylaws? Like nothing moves until the bylaws pass? Is that kind of?
You know, the nominating committee, we had a discussion about that, and I think, and Derek and some of the others of you that were on that committee, let me know what your recollection of that discussion was, but I believe they did not necessarily want that to hold up a vote for a chair. So I think if we find out that it's going to be delayed for some reason, you know, that's something the advisory board, you all can discuss if you feel like you need to wait for one to be able to do the other.
That's correct. We definitely wanted to make sure we had the chair description ironed out so that, you know, we actually know what we're looking for. So, yes.
Okay, next slide, Bettina or Evan. Jeremy, you want to give an update on the Roofathon?
Yeah, I'll make this brief. I'm watching the clock. So as everyone knows, Roofathon was scheduled for April. We had rescheduled it for June, and it is well underway. And just as a reminder, this was partly funded by Wells Fargo, who contributed $5,000 grant per household towards the roof costs. So each household received on average $30,000 to $35,000 in financing for their home repairs, including the roof. To date, 5 projects have been completed. 19 will finish up in the next 2 weeks. So by mid-July, 24 city residents will have brand new roofs. And if you're curious, so Wells Fargo contributed $125,000. HOF contributed the remaining $608,000. So this was a $733,000 project.
So how did Wells Fargo get a bigger logo?
That's a good question.
Good question.
So Jeremy, do you have any sense of geographically, did these cluster? Was there a specific neighborhood that was really heavily impacted, or are they just everywhere across the city?
Yeah, I wish we had the map for you. It was pretty cool. We were able to hit 8 out of the 9 council districts. And there was more in District 9. It's just disproportionately, you know, has many more homeowners in that area that have applied and have roofing issues. But yeah, just as a reminder, the households were picked out of the existing wait list that we had for this program, who identified roofing as their major need and were, you know, 30% AMI and below for the most part.
That's great.
And just as a reminder too, you know, we wanted to use this as a pilot. I'll put an advertisement in case any firm or company is watching this on the YouTube, but we would love for more folks that could contribute or donate funding to the Roofathon in the future, and we could, you know, do a much larger one next summer.
Jessica, it'd be cool to do a video on this. I feel like people would really like, oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. We've been talking to the city. We've been talking to the city's press folks about that. Maybe doing some type of Zoom call or something where, you know, one thing with everybody getting so good at Zoom, you know, we could show 20 houses at one time. So
yeah,
something cool like that.
Those videos with the emotional music, everyone always really likes them.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make a quick note that the picture you see on the screen was the first Roofathon project completed by Spambauer Construction. The homeowner is a delightful a woman who's been there her whole life and is a paraplegic, so the upgrades to the modifications to her house were definitely very impactful for her.
Thanks.
Okay.
Great. Next.
So I can give a brief update on the status of the annual report. So I circulated a draft to the advisory board members early this week. We've extended the deadline for the report by a week or so just to allow for more time to edit it, incorporate feedback. So definitely thank you to the advisory board members and URI staff who've contributed feedback and comments. Just a reminder, if you would like to submit any additional feedbacks or edits for the annual report, please email me today as soon as possible. We are aiming to have a digital draft version, or I'm sorry, a digital final version of the report by Thursday's, next Thursday's URA board. And then if you want to switch to the next slide. So these are just the update slides that we typically have. So you'll see that there's pretty equal distribution amongst all 9 council districts for the Housing Stabilization Program, Homeowner Assistance Program, and then for the down payment. So all of our consumer programs seem to be touching all the council districts throughout the city of Pittsburgh. And so this is just a breakdown of closed and completed versus committed and in progress projects that we have for HOF funded projects. One thing I wanted to point out was the HSP program. So you'll see we have about 250 that have completed the HSP program and process. We have about 230 that is in progress right now. With the addition of the 7 service providers, we're hoping to increase that capacity substantially in the coming months. We're definitely looking forward to receiving that data once we get the program implemented with the new service providers and the community ambassadors. And the next slide is just the breakdown by funding as well. So you can see the funds that have been expended on the left side under closed projects, and then the funds that are currently committed or assigned to a household, and we're just waiting for them to complete the project where we can close them out. And then the next slide, these are the ones that you typically see. These are just the summaries of the closed and committed. So we are over halfway committed and closed with the HOF funds over the 3-year period. So we've expended almost 15 million as well. So we still have a ways to go, but we're definitely making a lot of progress. And then we're going to be looking towards the 2021 allocation plans pretty soon as well. So that's just something to keep in mind, that that's coming down the line as well. And then if you want to just breeze through the next 2. So these are the breakdowns again. It's just the data presented in different ways. And then the next. I'll pass it back to Jessica.
And then the next, oh, go ahead. I was just going to say the next meeting is in August 6th, 9 a.m. Does anybody have any questions?
One quick question. Since the Roofathon was so successful, why are we waiting until next year to try to do another one?
Funding.
Well, in part. Go ahead, Jeremy, you answer.
Funding. It's a large part of it. With the wait list that we have, we fully committed 2018 and well into 2019. So part of it is we need additional funding to try to subsidize the roofing. Part of it is contractors, although we are getting more and more people stepping up. And part of it is timing with weather.
Yeah, and also all the administrative, getting the building permits on time and the administrative paperwork and everything needed at the URA too. So our goal is if we do it once a year and we do it huge, we bring in lots and lots of funders. But that's not to say that people still aren't getting roofs through the regular HAP program, because they are. But this is just, you know, the Roofathon, you know, will be a once a year event. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you so much. I think we're 11 o'clock on the nose. So thank you very much, everybody, for getting on. I hope everybody has a great month of July, and we will see everyone in August.